guys, in today's video I'm going to show you how to make some fairly simple fairy wings. Now I did do a demonstration of these at Cake International a few weeks ago, but many of you guys couldn't get there to watch it and you did request that I show you online, so this is for you guys. So I'm gonna just need an old polystyrene dummy or something that I can stick the fairy wings in to dry. I'm gonna be using some gelatin. You can use leaf gelatin or like the powdered granule stuff. I'm gonna use this one, which is like the powdery granule stuff. You can use food colours, wires. If you're going to go for a wire, go for something fairly thin. So I've got gauge 30 and 28 wires here. So I think I'm going to use the gauge 30. And I've got some boiling water now. I've got just under 100 millilitres of it in there. And I'm just going to empty one of the sachets into it. So the water does need to be fairly warm to melt the gelatin, but it doesn't have to be fully at boiling point. So you're going to give it a bit of a stir just to melt that gelatin. Be careful not to stir it too vigorously, otherwise you're going to get loads of air bubbles in there. And I don't know if you guys can see ones that I had made earlier that I've set and I've decorated. Some of them are quite opaque, some of them are quite transparent. So it depends on how thick your gelatin is when you dip your wires into it as well. So let's make our wire frames. Now I'm going with white wires because I'm going to use white edible pen on them and it matches nicely. You can use a different colour wire if you prefer. And all I'm going to do is just create little loops and then you can bend that loop around slightly to change the shape of the wing. Just make sure it's twisted at the bottom end. And if you try and do them in twos so that each pair of wings are similar, I never get them quite the same. Now you can print yourself off templates of shapes of actual butterfly wings or even dragonfly wings if you like, guys. But because these are fairly simple, I'm not worrying about using a template. They're more or less just kind of teardrop shapes with the odd little tweak here and there. So what you're going to find is the smaller you make these, the little hoops and wing shapes, the easier it is to dip them into the gelatin and have the gelatin kind of create a little skin or layer over it without it popping. The bigger they are, the harder it is to dip them. So I think my gelatin is about dissolved and you can colour this now. So it's a slightly yellow colour to start with. If you want it different, you can add some powder. So I've got like a sparkly powder in this one. And I'll put links below to the ones that I've used so that you guys can have a go with similar ones if you want. But of course, you can use completely different ones. Now, my gelatin is still fairly warm at this stage. Now, when I dip my wire in, can you see it's created like a thin film? And you can see some of the sparkly bits that I've dropped in, but it's not too obvious. It's fairly thin, very transparent. You can see through that. The thinner ones can wrinkle a little bit sometimes when they dry. Just make sure that you're doing both the same that are part of the matching pair of wings. Now, if it's too transparent, you can always add some more of your edible powders. Now, nobody's going to be eating these with them being wire and the wings, but it is still edible powders that I'm using in them still. Now, if you want them to be slightly less transparent, you can add even more colour. So you can use like a gel colour. This one's actually my airbrush colour. I just had it to hand and I thought maybe we'd go for a slight purple tint. And you could even try dipping them in while it's sort of a bit marbled, but it's still very transparent because that gelatin is still fairly warm. So as the gelatin cools down, it will start to thicken. And as it thickens, when you dip your fairy wings in, it will become slightly thicker. A lot of the time, it's going to depend on what you're after with it. You see, sometimes they do snap and break, or it splits and tears in that middle bit. So just be careful of that. So I've mixed my colour up a little bit more. Can you see? I just want to show you what it's like when it gets really thick. So now it has cooled quite a bit. It didn't fill my wire straight away. It took a minute or two to do that, but it has done it. These are bigger wings as well, so it does make it a little bit more difficult. So pull them out slowly and carefully. And as it's getting thicker, you sometimes get a bit of a drip on there. So as this gelatin's firming up, or cooling down, it's firming up. You can see as I dip these thinner wings, they're looking like it's sitting on them thicker. So can you see that on there? It's slightly thicker. It's still a bit transparent, but not as much as it was before. And you can clearly see the difference between those ones and the ones that look really quite see-through. You don't see the purple on those ones that are thinner or covered more thinly in the gelatin. Now you can let them set and then double dip them. So you can dip them again. Can you see where it's a little bit thick at the bottom as well of the wing? Sometimes, you know, the drips will settle a bit thicker in some places than others. And you can always keep reheating that gelatin. So if it's getting a bit too thick, just heat it either in the microwave, but only for a few seconds, or you can sit your bowl of gelatin in a bowl of hot water just to warm it up a little bit. So you're best leaving these overnight to dry. And then once you know that they're fully dry, you can do a little bit of decoration on there. Now, I did try dusting dry powders on, but it didn't stick very well once the wings had dried. So for me, I found that using edible pens was the best way to go. Now, I like the white one on it, and you don't have to go for realistic patterns. So on this one, I'm just going to go for some swirls. The white also links it in nicely with the white edge of the wire. So because I'm using a white pen, it means I don't have to colour the white wire on the outer edge a colour for it to be sort of less obvious. And then let's go for some with a slightly different patterning now. I'm just kind of going for little lines. You can look at butterfly wings or dragonfly wings for examples of whereabouts all these lines sit and go. Try and repeat the same pattern on the opposite wing if you can. So if you keep it simple, it's easier to repeat the pattern on the other one. And play around, you know, they don't have to be realistic. You can play with little shapes. So you could put hearts and lines in. And can you see on the one where I've put a heart in, I've tried to colour the wire in pink rather than leaving it white on that one. And then just have a play around really then with how you want to sit all your wings. I realise most flies, dragonflies, butterflies have just 2 wings on each side. But, you know, if you're doing something quite fantasy style, you can put quite a few different wings together and try and line them up before you stick them in whatever they're going to go on, just so you can see what they look like. So you can then push them into the back of your model. So this one I have done before. You see she's got some holes in her back. It's easier if the model is quite fresh. This one's quite old, but have a bit of a play around with whereabouts you want to sit them. So I like the really transparent ones, but it's nice to get a mix of the transparent and the more opaque ones together. So here I am just sticking those wings into a slightly fresher doll cake that I've made. So this is my sugar plum fairy cake. Guys, this one you won't see on YouTube just yet, but this is my next video. So keep an eye out for this doll cake coming up in the next few days. Don't have the wires too long that you push into the body because we don't want them to come out of the front of her. And you can bend them around as long as those wires are thin. Just be careful you don't tear the gelatin wings when you are inserting them. So guys, really have a play around with the wings. I also added them to a display piece that I did at Cake International. It's a bit of a random creature that I put them on. It's a make-believe creature, this one. Also a fairy. So this one I used my new female body mold for this one. And I thought she looked great with some little fairy wings. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. It's fairly simple and easy to make. I'd love to see them if you guys have a go at making them. And keep an eye out for the next video. If you liked the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button and leave me a comment below. You can see more of my tutorials by clicking on the images on screen now. If you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button to stay up to date with my future tutorials. There are also links in the description box below where you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and more.